Hi guys, welcome to Lizzie Dean Makes. Today I'm doing a mini series on web coding. I've explained in previous videos why I'm doing this and how it relates to frugal living, why it's worthwhile adding it as a string to your bow. So I'm not going to mention those again here. What I want to mention in this video is talking about CSS3 and what new features are available in CSS3 and how it has changed the world of styling and design. I also want to talk a bit about SVG images. So CSS version 3, which is what CSS3 essentially is, brings a whole load of new features, a whole load of new options for styling your web page, for styling the different DOM elements within your website page. So there are various things that used to be really tricky to do in the past. For example, adding rounded corners. In CSS2 and previous incarnations of web pages in the past, if you wanted to have nice round corners on a button, for example, you had to create 4 corner images, each with a rounded corner, and then you had to produce a tile that would go on either side and would run and repeat along to make up the 4 edges and the 4 corners. So essentially you would probably need to have at least 8 different images to make up the outside of your button, and then probably another image to go across and make up the interior of your button. So having a button that looked 3D in Web 2.0 was actually really tricky to achieve, and you had to slice the graphics using something like Photoshop, come up with little parts of the image that you need to then build it back up to the original vision that the designer had when they designed this web page. So you as a coder had to do quite a lot of slicing and handling of small bits of pictures to sort of repeat them and come up with the bigger picture, building them back up again. In CSS3, most of that has just completely disappeared. Now you can use a feature in CSS3 called border-radius, and that basically works out the radius of the border of your image, so you can create rounded corners on any element just by specifying the border-radius property. You can specify it for individual corners like the top left or the top right, or a couple of the corners and not another. If you wanted to make something that looked a bit like a tab on a file system that you might have leafed through in days gone by, then you could do that by having just the top 2 corners rounded off and the bottom 2 sort of flat into the next box. And that can all be achieved just using CSS3 properties. There are other things like gradients, opacity, the ability to make things transparent or semi-transparent, so you can see perhaps a white background over the top of a lovely photograph of the mountains, and you can see through the white background to see the picture of the mountains, but there's enough of a difference so that when you write text over it you can actually read the text, which you wouldn't normally be able to read text easily over a photograph of the mountains because it's too busy and confusing. Adding a sort of semi-transparent white layer is a really popular thing to do at the moment, but it's really straightforward using CSS3 properties. So there's some great new features in CSS3, including a whole kit of animations and transitions that you can use to style up your DOM elements to make them a bit more go-get-em, interactive, moving, so it's definitely worth having a look into what's available in CSS3. The other thing that's important to note when you're talking about CSS3 is that it is not supported by all browsers, and each feature is not supported by all browsers. So when you want to go and create, say, a text shadow, there are loads of different tools available online. If you search, text shadow CSS generator, you'll come up with a whole bunch of different tools that you can use to generate all the different browser versions of text shadow, the CSS3 property, but there might be a Moz version and there might be a WebKit version for Chrome and for Firefox, you know, specific different browser versions of this new CSS3 feature. This is the case with older features from CSS2 as well. They don't always have identical support, i.e. Internet Explorer tends to just make up its own way of doing all sorts of things like opacity, rather than using RGBA, which is red, green, blue, and opacity. It uses just something called opacity, completely separate, and it has its own way of dealing with that. So cross-browser compatibility in CSS is something that you have to sort of learn and understand. There are some great websites that give CSS hacks, and they tell you, okay, if you want to achieve this in all browsers, these are the various things that you have to include. So you want to do opacity, that's fine. Here are the minimum level of things that you need to put into your CSS style sheet in order to be cross-browser compatible, so that the same opacity happens no matter which browser uses your website. There's plenty of tools out there on that, and it's well worth having a look at. So CSS, starting to look at the various things that are available in CSS3, the new features, learning a bit about how you can identify how to achieve cross-browser compatibility for both the new features and for older features, and finding some resources that you can use on a regular basis when creating CSS that will give you the definitive guide. Somebody somewhere has done that in the past and has sat and worked out which things are needed to work on that specific version of Firefox or that specific version of Chrome or whatever it might be, and so use their knowledge. It doesn't replace testing it for yourself in those browser environments, but it definitely gives you a good place to start when coming up with CSS that is cross-browser compatible. The next thing I want to talk about is the use of SVG images. So an SVG is a vector graphic, which is essentially an image that is built on the fly using coordinates. So it's an image that can scale perfectly without becoming pixelated and blurry and a bit of a mess. So if you've ever tried to zoom in on a picture and it's gone a bit like a Lego or a Minecraft pixelated mess, that is an image that is a defined sort of pixel density and things. Each pixel is told what colour to be to make up that picture. So PNGs and JPEGs and things like that are pixel based images where each pixel is told what colour to be, whereas a vector graphic is actually like an XML document with tags and things in, and it's basically much more mathematical. It specifies, you know, angles, positions, you know, lines between them, and it specifies the colours of the lines and the opacity of parts and things like that. But because it is being calculated and worked out when it's executed, you can execute it at any size and it will scale accordingly without becoming pixelated and messy. And because it's basically XML instructions, it's actually a very short file, so it's very quick to load SVGs, and it's very quick to display them on screen, and they also scale. So there's many reasons why using SVGs for your icons and for, you know, graphics that you need to use repeatedly on your web page is great, because you can load it once and use it in multiple places, and it is very light and it's very scalable, and so they're a really great idea to use. But they are a bit complicated in terms of using SVG images within your CSS and within your HTML. You have to handle them in a slightly different way to how you would handle a normal image tag. So I'm going to include a couple of links in the description of this video to some really good tutorials that talk you through how to use SVG images, why you would use SVG images, and the limitations of the various different methods of implementing SVG images, you know, different syntaxes that can achieve the same overall aim, but there are different ways that you might do it depending on what it is that you need to achieve from it. So I will include some links to that tutorial blog in the description box of this video. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, and remember to check out the rest of the videos in this mini series to learn more about where to get started teaching yourself to code for the web. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.